in this discussion, we would like to shift it a little bit. I know everybody wants to hear about what's the everybody wants to know what's the oil price going to look like next month. Um, I can tell you already, if you want to know, you would have to get this guy on the side because he doesn't do TMC. So, but we want to start with a different topic. In 2021, the IEA published a net zero scenario calling for a halt in investments in new oil and gas fields. Have these net zero scenarios already impacted investment into oil and gas globally, as well as in our continent?
For me?
You could start, Excellency.
Thank you, NJ. That's a great question. And to give you a short answer, yes, they have impacted. But let me take it back a step and explain really what was the net zero scenario, since you mentioned the IEA's net zero scenario. In 2021, as you said, there was a scenario issued, which was, as most of you know, a scenario that calls for reducing investments in new oil and gas. And that's not a problem because we at OPEC also have scenarios. We issue scenarios. We have a base case, we have a scenario that could be higher or lower. And most people do that in scenario planning. The problem is when that scenario becomes the scenario. It's sold and marketed and talked about as if it's the Bible or the Quran of the energy pathway of the future. That's where the problem lies. And therefore, I believe it took prominence globally. Welcome, Your Excellency. And it became like the leading pathway for investors, for discussions in boardrooms, for CEOs of companies all around the world. And we saw many companies around the world, IOCs, you name it, changing course. And instead of focusing on investing in oil and gas, which is their core business, companies started to shift away into focusing into other sources of energy, renewables being part of it, actually moving away from their core business. So yes, definitely it has impacted investments. We've seen investments reaching record lows, talking about levels as low as 200 billion per year.
And how much would it take to get us back to where we should be, according to your OPEC outlook?
In OPEC's outlook, we have always called for more investments. This year's outlook, we are seeing investment requirements of around $18.2 trillion in the upstream, downstream, midstream, the whole value chain from now to 2050. That's around $700 billion per year, which is a tremendous amount of money.
But by your projections, are we set on a path to get there?
I think investments have picked up in the previous years because people have started to talk about net zero and climate change matters with more realism, with more realistic approach and sense of realism and pragmatism. And we've seen companies redirect their focus back to core business. Therefore, there's been an uptick in investments. They are still, in my view, not in the same level that they should be at. Now, the funny thing, you mentioned the IEA, let's stick with the IEA. They issued a report a week ago or 10 days ago calling for investments in oil and gas again.
There's a reason they are not here because we're going to ask them. But maybe they heard you were coming, so
the new report they issued says that the upstream industry requires investments of around 540 billion per year. So it begs the question, what happened to all the previous 3-4 years where investments were undermined? We at OPEC have been advocating for investing on a regular basis because this industry is not the industry where you can just simply switch the tap on and switch it back off. You have to invest, and you need a long lead time to invest of 5 to up to 7 years in some cases, and that requires financing and planning, and it requires clarity because you have to give a clear signal to the industry. We have to invest today just to stay stable at current production levels, let alone to cater for the future demand growth that's happening, which in our World Oil Outlook, we see demand reaching 123 million barrels a day by 2050. And unfortunately,
Excellency, I'm going to stop you because I need to go to
please.
we in Africa blame you for the IEA problem because Fatih Birol left from your organization, then he went there. So you probably go fix what you created, you know. So Senator Heineken,
That was before my time, so I'm not responsible for that.
whoever time is who was there, I feel really bad for them. Senator Heineken, if Secretary General just talked about underinvestment. How has that underinvestment, let's pick up on these scenarios that I call them voodoo scenarios on net zero. How has that underinvestment affected an African country like yours with massive gas, massive oil potential in and affected your economy as a country as Nigeria?
Yeah, thank you very much.
I wouldn't blame you for the underinvestment. I take note that you just came into office a few
years
months
ago.
ago. Yes.
But it's a high time I said it all. He as the custodian of the records in OPEC, secretariat, know the figures more. But we can't, you know, um, deny the fact that because of the wrong approach by the IEA, investment, practically dried up, particularly in Africa. Because like I said earlier, in the opening section, it was a case where the sinner was telling the righteous man not to sin. Meanwhile, he wasn't stop sinning. So those who were responsible for the missions were not stopping the missions. The missions were continuing, and they were saying that, look, Africa, stop investing. We just bury, your oil and gas assets, and then we just dash you money. The money that never came. Even if it comes, it can never be enough. So for Nigeria, and by extension in Africa, investment practically, was frozen. The same effect, may not be in the Gulf, region. But the Gulf countries, have raised enormous capital so they can finance their own investment substantially. But in Africa, we're dependent, you know, basically from financing from the West.
Minister Itua,
Yeah.
you discussed this afternoon about new investment and also some of the projects we've seen you done, increasing production. Does your membership in OPEC stop you from driving in new investment in Congo, increasing production, and carrying out new oil projects, or has the partnership with OPEC been beneficial towards that?
Thank you. Because I think some people, some opinion, they think that, Pep, there is no democracy. We don't talk, we don't exchange, we don't collaborate. But in fact, somebody or some people, they just decide and we have to follow up. It's not true because we discussed freely. Each voice in OPEC count has the same value. And if we don't agree in almost a consensus basis, I should say unanimous basis, we don't take a decision. So we take a big profit of being there. This is a place where you can really, that's my opinion, understand very well as all business is working. OPEC works mainly on the market, wanting to have it the most stable possible, which is a very strong condition to make business. If you don't have stability in terms of price, how can you make a business plan? How can you make a business study? So it's very for us important and helpful to be there, to understand, to have a part of, to be part of the decision, to be a decision maker. You're doing that for the world. Really, it's very exciting to be there. It's an honor for me, for the country, for Congo, small one, to be a member of OPEC. And really, any countries, you have your policy, you have your strategy, you're working with the private companies freely, you're trying to bring solutions for your country, for your population, for today, for the next generation. And OPEC, they have just to see what you're doing and they put it inside, the basket of the data they have to manage when we have to take decisions together. I think seeing more production coming from OPEC country member is a good news. As you were saying that the big issues now is to bring more investment. And if the OPEC country members are bringing more investment, are bringing more production, is very good news. It's the best way to stabilize the market. Today, the most important issue is to fight, this kind of ideology my brother minister was talking about, mindset, which is just a crazy one, saying that we should stop producing oil and gas or producing fossil oil. The day we do that, the world stops working. The day we do that, I should say in a different way. The day we will just say that we want to do that, just we want to do that, the world will stop working. Because the prices will just become crazy, the market will collapse, and the world will stop working. And we have to do that for maybe the next 40 years. In the same time, I was listening carefully to my brother saying that African emission is around 3%. But my brother, in the same time, Africa is a place who is capturing better than anyone in the world because of the forest and other things, capturing carbon. This is the best, we are the best one to do that. So in fact, I think we are net zero today. The emission is 3%, but we're capturing more than 3% by the Congo Basin, forest, and so and so and so. So we are a very good example of continent, a very good one. We should be the first one to be allowed to produce more and more. In the same time, we are not producing for our country only, not only for our population. We mainly produce and export what we have. That means that somebody is interested by buying what we produce. Somebody, not one, but everyone is interested. I didn't have any information saying that an African country put crude oil on the market and didn't find a buyer. No. So there is a market, there is a demand, and the demand requires for us to produce more and more and more. So today, for example, Congo, we have already announced in 5 years we will double our production. We will come from 20. It's the first news for Secretary General. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you that. We are going from 20 to 268,000 barrels a day to 500,000 barrels a day in 5 years.
Thank you, Excellency. But I want to shift a little bit, and I hope you keep it crisp. I need to ask this question, and I think for most people in this room, for most Africans, it's so important for them. We've seen you do a lot of work with the G20 around clean cooking. We're still at a continent where almost 1 billion don't have access to clean cooking. Where does OPEC stand? And I think maybe all the ministers could discuss this together with the Secretary General on working on getting access to clean cooking, especially with LPG, to Africans. Because at the end, all this investment, it means nothing if everyday people can get basic access to clean cooking technologies and LPG to really improve our living standards.
So if I may just start, maybe, Your Excellency, if you allow me. I think we have many countries within OPEC. Let me just take an example of our biggest member country, Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has a clean cooking program to develop clean cooking fuels using LPG in Africa. And I know that for a fact. It's the Saudi Ministry of Energy working with many of our African member countries and also with the G20 presidency on that. Also, we have our sister organization, the OPEC Fund for International Development, which is heavily investing in development programs all around the world, including investing in making LPG available as a clean cooking solution. So, but that comes with investments as well, because you get LPG also from investing in a refinery. You get LPG from associated gas when you invest in production as well. So all of that is a bundle that comes together. But there has to be a roadmap on how we want to make it available to the people. As I agree with you. And that requires close government-to-government collaboration and investments together in many projects. And that will make people receive these simple cylinders of clean cooking fuels. And you know, when you avoid biomass, for example, actually using LPG, this is a WHO statistic saying that LPG reduces emissions by 50% compared to biomass, imagine. And we have around 3.2 million deaths per year just because of people using inefficient cooking fuels.
Senator Heineken, same question. LPG. How has LPG penetration that you're working on been able to still get into everyday Nigerians in your country?
Yeah, Nigeria has a policy where we officially adopted, gas as a clean fuel. And so, because of the importance of that, the present administration appointed somebody as Minister of Gas, who incidentally is also, in this conference. But let me say that we have comprehensive, programs to see how we can get, LPG available, for our teeming Nigerians as part of our steps, to ensure that, we reduce the level of emissions, in the country. But like what Hightam said, the level of LPG you produce in the continent also requires investment. Without investment in gas, the LPG, would not be available. Right now, Nigeria would not produce enough LPG, and so we also rely, on import to supplement what we produce locally. Meanwhile, we have abundance, 209 trillion cubic feet of gas. And, even when it's available, because we don't run a communist system, people must also be able to raise money on their own substantially to be able to buy, the gas cylinders, that will be required, to sustain, this clean cooking, program. And that is why we're saying that, look, the only way Africa can come out of poverty is for us to explore our resources, all our available sources of energy, so that we can industrialize and employ our own people. If we don't do that, we'll continue to depend, on programs from other people to solve, our own problem. I'm aware of, the Saudi program also in Nigeria. But I think Saudi, had a budget of $30 million, to support people, with clean cooking, facilities in Nigeria. But Nigeria is a country of 220 million people and still growing. So that is like a drop in the ocean. That also complements what we are doing as a government. But fundamentally, the point is that we need more investments, and the investments are coming.
Venezuela is a founding member of this organization. And before we get to its 65th anniversary, Excellency, I wouldn't be led to leave this room if I don't ask you this question. So I'm going to ask it. Looking beyond 2026, what strategies is OPEC considering when it comes to managing oil supply and demand, particularly in the context of increasing competition from OPEC and non-OPEC producers and the global push towards cleaner sources of energy?
Well, as I maybe indicated in some of my earlier statements and comments, that we always take a longer term view about the global market, trends, trajectories for growth. And based on that, we plan our strategies both within our member countries, but also as a secretariat, we advise our member countries on what projections would be like in the future. So beyond 2026, I think we're talking more on the medium to longer term. So for us, as I said, we see the global population rising from now 8 billion to 10 billion. And most of that growth is going to be in Africa and then the rest of the developing world in Asia. And younger populations will require the luxuries that we all take for granted, or some of us take for granted in many parts of the world. The urbanization that I spoke about, also having its impact. And the economy is set to grow with trade and everything flowing and flourishing. So that means that the world's going to require about 23% more energy in 2050 than it is consuming today. And therefore, OPEC, when we put a strategy, when we put directions to our countries, we keep repeating the key word, which I stressed on in my statement, and I think you heard all their excellencies saying. It's the importance of investing today to be ready for that day in the future, beyond 2026, as you say. So we are clear in that respect that OPEC, our member countries, have to be ready to be able to supply that demand when it comes about in the future. And it's not a matter of when, if, it's a matter of when it's going to come about. And I think in our projections, we're very clear with the timelines, our views. And I think I'm really happy to say that we're seeing many more people now taking a very similar approach to OPEC's views and about the long-term trajectory for demand growth. Maybe not identical, of course, and there must be variations and differences, but obviously all pointing towards the same trajectory for growth in the future. And we've been saying this for many years, advocating this for many years. I remember when I first came here in 2022, I was probably the only one saying that we need to invest in a world where nobody was saying we need to invest. Actually, as His Excellency Itwa mentioned, we were in a world where people were saying, stop using oil and gas, keep it under the ground. You all remember, Your Excellencies. Today, the tone is changing. And we're really happy to see the importance of a more realistic approach towards energy future, because if we don't prepare today for what's coming in the next couple of years, I think the world's going to have some serious problems. Today, people are talking about the limitations on spare capacity already. Imagine what's going to happen in the future when more demand comes about. So I think we have to be clear-minded. We have to be setting our strategies very clear and laser-focused on the objectives that are coming in the future based on very clear projections and based on what's happened historically. There's no way around it. There's growth, and growth means that you have to be ready to supply, and that means you have to invest today, not tomorrow.
I think we're running out of time, but I just want to have a last round, less than 30 seconds. It's very hard to get the politicians to be less than 30 seconds, but we'll try. Senator Heineken, 65, OPEC celebrating 65 years. Where do you see these organizations, its partnership with Africa, going over the next 65 years?
Well, I think, OPEC's relationship with, OPEC member countries will continue to grow. And I believe that it's better for us to remain, as members of, OPEC, strategic members of OPEC. Because even if you don't belong to OPEC, you belong to another group that is OPEC plus. And it's good for everybody, to belong to, OPEC or the other group for the purpose of, price stability, sustainable, supply and demand, chains and all that. But since this is my last, statement, let me, use the opportunity to say that, Nigeria as a country has a huge market, for fossil fuel. Today, Dangote's refinery alone needs about 650,000 barrels a day. BOA is building another one that's going to be 250,000 barrels a day. That's already 1 million. The existing refinery is owned by NNPC. Altogether, is another 450,000 barrels a day. And then if you look at the modular refineries we have in the country, we're having a refining capacity that will be in excess of what we currently produce, inclusive of condensate. So certainly, as the population is growing, as he said, demand certainly will grow. As of today, Dangote produces maybe 40% of what we need locally. And so the rest is imported. Dangote and the other refiners produce maybe about 40%. We import the rest 60% of refined products to be able to meet our demand. And so certainly, as demand increases, we also have to take steps. We have to make the investments that will grow our production to meet both our local demand and then our international, obligations. I think it's important for me to make this point.
We are very lucky because we are a member of OPEC today. We have the headquarters of APO in Brazzaville. Right now, Congo has a presidency. We really think that we should strengthen again. We're working together already, but strengthen more relationship between APO and OPEC. Many members of APO are also members of OPEC. What we want is to see the producing countries, the developing countries, and sometimes developing countries are producing countries have a bigger impact on the market. We're trying to have just our word to say, which is so different for the other product, for the other raw material we have in Africa, where we don't have anything to say. We just have to support the consequences of the market, and somebody's deciding, we don't know which one. For oil, we have that two organizations having a key role, having an impact on the market. We have to strengthen it, and I hope that many other countries in Africa starting producing oil and gas will join us simultaneously in APO and OPEC, and then give us more power. You have been talking about non-OPEC and OPEC countries. We should not have any competition between non-OPEC and OPEC countries because we all producing oil and gas.
Is it true that OPEC was founded in Africa?
Yes, actually, that's a great point. And I
you tell us the story?
have here in the audience the former minister of Egypt, my brother, Minister Tariq Al-Mullah, if you don't mind him standing up.
Tariq, please.
His Excellency and I, we went to the place where it was founded in Cairo. The official founding of OPEC took place in Baghdad, as I said in my speech. But a year earlier, in 1959, there was a gentleman's agreement that was reached in the Yacht Club in Cairo, believe it or not. And that club still remains there. We went there a couple of years and we had a small celebration there to revive those memories. Of course, we were not around in 1959. At least I wasn't. But he was, I think he was. But definitely, I mean, the future is promising for Africa. OPEC is proud of all its member countries, and OPEC is there to support Africa and its member countries. I said it in my remarks. My presence here, we have a big team, my colleagues, presenting our research, our outlook. We have several staff members who maybe I would ask Dr. Saad to stand up. Suleiman Saad is from Nigeria. Mohammed Attaba is from Algeria. Dr. Ben Youssef is from Algeria. Where is Suraj Matori? Suraj Matori is in our public relations from Nigeria. We have a big contingent of African nationals who work with us in the Secretariat. And this is something we are proud of. They gain experience, knowledge, interact with other member country officials and staff members. And this is all enriching and giving wealth to the African youth and the African nationals and their potential to bring back all that experience, to harness it and develop their own petroleum industries and gas industries in their own countries.
Your Excellencies, thank you so much. It's a big honor. And we keep on this relationship and this dialogue in OPEC and Africa, and we keep moving. Thank you so much.